All right, looks like we're live. What's happening? You are live with Coach Brandon, and today I have a special guest, my good friend, Coach Frank Rich. And I've known Frank for about a year now, and I had the pleasure of spending a lot of time with Frank in person for a few days, a few weeks back at a business event in Vegas. And I'm super excited for this conversation because Frank works with men to help them overcome what, in my opinion, is one of the biggest problems men are facing right now. So both collectively as men on like a large scale in society and also personally, meaning if you have this problem, it's likely the root cause of a lot of the other problems you experience, or at the very least it pours gasoline on the fire when it comes to some of those problems. And that problem that Frank specializes in helping men overcome is pornography addiction. And I know that there's three types of guys when it comes to this topic. So the first one, there's a lot of guys actually now who are very familiar with this topic, who know it's a problem, they're open to learning more about it, and they know the benefits of overcoming it and the strategies to do so. Number two, there's the guys who are just hearing this topic being talked about from the perspective of it being a huge problem for the first time, who are curious and open-minded to learn more about it. And then lastly, third, there's guys who hear this topic come up and they think something along the lines of like, this is a bunch of BS. Every guy watches porn. It's completely normal and there's nothing wrong with it. So if you're the third type, my challenge for you is to listen to this conversation with an open mind, because I think it could have a massive benefit on your life. And then also, if you're one of the guys who is familiar with this topic, or type one or two, and you know it's a problem, you know there's massive benefits to be gained out of overcoming it. Do us a huge favor, share this video, whether you're watching live on Facebook right now or on YouTube. The recordings will be up, so if you're watching the replay and you get value out of this, please share and spread the word. So to start off, I think a good kind of multi-factor question to ask you, Frank, is, so why is pornography such a big problem for men today? And what inspired you to place your focus and your career on helping men overcome pornography addiction? And then you can also kind of reintroduce yourself and add anything I missed in the intro there.
Yeah, absolutely, Brandon. And I appreciate the invite here today, the opportunity to have this conversation. I think it's one that is needed, and it's been, my goal, for really going on almost 3 years now to be at the front and really leading this conversation from an education standpoint first, just explaining what's been going on and why it is a major issue. But, we really planted our flag deeply here in the last 2 years of really helping men out of the hole and out of the struggle. So incredibly grateful for today's conversation and opportunity to speak to your men out there. So very, very appreciative of that. Why did I decide to do this? Right. I think that's the second part of your question.
Yeah.
It's interesting. I get this question quite a bit. And, if I go back like over the course of my life and career, like this isn't something that I was even really aware about until probably 3.5, maybe 4 years ago. Now I was addicted to pornography for almost 20 years. I mean, I got introduced to it at the age of 6. 15, 16 is when we got the internet kind of for the first time. So I'm dating myself a little bit. But in my early 20s, I was working in the wireless industry. I had the original BlackBerry. So from that point on, it was a daily consumption, and many times multiple days. It really hit rock bottom for me probably in my mid 30s. At that point, I'd been an entrepreneur for a couple years. I was doing very well on the outside, successfully, financially, materialistic, and whatnot. But I found myself literally spending 6, 7, 8 hours a day, sometimes just consuming pornography, because I worked from home, had a great, made a great living, worked 3, 4 hours a day, and the rest was kind of just sitting there watching porn. What I didn't really understand, and I wasn't able to connect the dots, was a lot of the things that I was struggling with: anxiety, depression, lack of motivation, lack of drive, sexual performance issues. I didn't understand how these were all tied to my use and consumption of pornography. It wasn't until I got on the other side and my brain fully rebooted that I realized that this had been an hindrance on me in my life for 20 plus years, like I said. Now, as somebody that had studied human performance, self-development, high performance, had accomplished things in the business space, had accomplished things in bodybuilding, I had what a lot of people saw as like a successful life. But if I was still struggling, I was still able to get caught up in this. What about the guys that don't have my background? What about the guys that didn't have access to the information or to the materials that I did? They needed to know this. So I felt a call back in 2019, early 2019, just to start a podcast. It was something that I'd been very interested about and interested in for a long time, but I never had the right message or the right opportunity or the right voice to put out there. It wasn't until my brain reset and reboot and I began to see the whole world a whole lot differently. I said, hey, maybe there's an opportunity here to share this. So I started a podcast in July of 2018 called The Superhuman Life. And the sole mission back then was simply to put my story and bring other people on the platform to share their stories as well about overcoming addictions, about overcoming struggles, overcoming adversity. And those first 3 to 4 months were incredible. We got recognized by Apple, new and noteworthy. We really started to gain some traction. The message was really getting received very, very well. What was interesting as somebody that had been running a fitness company at the time is the messages I began to receive in my inbox radically changed. It went from, Frank, thank you for your fitness stuff. Thank you for your programs. Thank you for helping me build a bigger body, to thank you for your vulnerability. Thank you for your willingness to have the conversation that nobody else is going to have. So early on, I knew I was onto something. Then another 3 or 4 months go by and the messages, can you help me, started to come in. And at first I had no interest in it at all. I said, I don't even think that I could. Like, this is what I did. I'm literally telling you guys everything through these conversations. Just go take action with this. But you know the power of mentorship. You know the power of having incredible people in your lives. I had a lot of men around me that were speaking into me. Frank, there's a reason why you went through what you went through. There's a reason why you've lived this life. There's a reason why you had to overcome this first. And they pushed me, and it was actually at one of Vince's event. It was the Clearwater Mastermind in January of 2020 that I forget who taught it. I think he taught it or Big Frank taught it. They taught the SMS post, or it was kind of a second time they were sharing it. And I was sitting in the audience at the event. I was just a guest there. I wasn't attending as a member. And I said, maybe there's something I could do with this. So I literally left that event the following Monday morning. I did a little Twitter style post on my Instagram. I said, I'm looking for 5 guys that are struggling with a secret behavior with pornography and are committed to making change. I'll coach you for the next 4 months to help you rebuild your body, reshape your heart, and rewire your brain. And that led us to, getting our first two clients. I had no curriculum. I didn't know what the hell I was going to do. But I believed that if they bought into me, that I could lead them to freedom. So those next 4 months, we built the Reboot Your Life curriculum that's now been tested, tweaked, optimized. It's been rolled out into a course. A couple hundred men have succeeded. So to answer the question in a long form, I had to overcome this first. And, I've always wanted to help people. I mean, that's why I got into entrepreneurship. That's why I got into fitness. So this was a unique way for me to have conversations from a place where I didn't see a lot of men opening up about these things. So that's what's led me to everything that we're doing here today. Is I've had to overcome it first, but I just love impacting and helping other people. So that answers the second question. And we can chew on that a little bit if there's follow up there that you have. Now the first one was, how is it impacting men, or why is it such a big issue?
Why is it such a big problem for men today? And I'm familiar with the topic because I've been working through overcoming it myself. I'm familiar with your work, by the way, Frank. His podcast is amazing, The Superhuman Life. He has some awesome guests on there. But yeah, just for our listeners, why is pornography such a big problem for men today?
Well, I think when we look at what men are really struggling with today, the internet streaming pornography, one reason why pornography, or it's such a big issue, is the fact that it's in its infancy stages. I mean, Gary Wilson talks about this on one of his videos online. It's called the Great Porn Experiment. I mean, if we think about the internet in the form and fashion that we have it here today, it's maybe been 2 decades, if that. So we're literally seeing things happen in real time. I mean, Gen Z, I believe that's the generation that is now becoming into their 20s. They're the first generation that has had it with them since they were children. My introduction to pornography at 6 was to a magazine. I didn't get access to the internet until I was in my 20s. Had I had it when I was 6, I can't tell you how bad the addiction would have been. So I think one of the reasons why it's so bad or such a big problem is there's just lack of education around it. The second thing, you address it in your intro, right, is the unwillingness for some people to even accept that it's a real thing. If you even look in the DSM-5, which is the clinical book that is used by physicians, it's just used in the medical space to define addiction, pornography addiction is not accepted by the DSM-5. So you get a lot of people that push back, oh, it's not even a real thing. You're making this up. There's, you're just trying to, morally preach at people or all you're trying to make them feel bad about their sexual behavior. And that's never been the case for me. If you have gambling addiction, you have gaming addiction in there. The brain's response to both of those is exactly the same that it is to pornography addiction. So why isn't it a part of there? So I think that it's lack of education, unwillingness for people to accept it. And I mean, I could go down a deep conspiracy rabbit hole with you that I think that there's an agenda tied to it to weaken men and masculinity around the world. But we don't need to go too deep there. But it clearly does, right? It impacts and takes away what I believe are some of the most core masculine virtues: provision, protection, providing. Pornography is none of those. It is literally consuming other people, oftentimes very vulnerable people, for your own short-term and instant gratification pleasure. So that's the opposite, in my opinion, of what it means to be a man. But I think the biggest reasons are the infancy stages of it, not having the education, and a lot of people not willing to actually accept it. So for those people out there that are like, pornography addiction is not a real thing, what are you talking about? Question to you is, how do you define addiction? What is your definition? Because I had one of the world's leading experts in the world on my podcast, Dr. Arnold Lemke. Her definition of addiction is the continued or repeated use of substance and or behavior despite negative consequences to self and or others. So if you've identified that your use of pornography has negative impacts to you, that's your decision. That's your life. You can choose to accept that you have an addiction. You don't need somebody else's opinion to tell you that. So I think most people that say that don't have a clear definition of addiction. And what they're trying to do is they're trying to deflect because they feel like people are judging them. And I'm not judging anybody for anything that you've done. I've admitted I consume pornography every day for 20 plus years. So who would I be to judge somebody? Now, if you're ready to make changes and you want to take action, yes, we can help. But now I'm going on too long. But those are the reasons why I think it's been a major problem and how it's really destroying men.
Yeah, no, and you touched on this a bit, and I think this is the big thing that separates the guys who like know it's an issue from the guys who are like, how is this an issue? Is when you look at like different things that you can become addicted to. It's super new. We are just scratching the surface when it comes to like understanding how people come addicted to it and how it affects your brain, and all the evidence is showing that like it's in a category of its own. Like Frank said, back when he started consuming it, he was looking at magazines. Now, kids have phones at God knows what age. I don't even know.
Yeah.
Like I think some kids get smartphones.
5-6 years old.
5-6 years old, and all they have to do is type in a few things, and they have access to view more naked women.
Mm-hmm.
Our brains have evolved to be used to seeing so more than you could see in a lifetime in 1 hour, and not only just naked women, but people having sex, right? So that's why I mentioned, and I truly believe this in the intro, this is one of the biggest problems that men are facing, both collectively and then on a personal level, is because there's not much we know about it, and it's a lot more powerful than most people really realize. So
yeah, and you're getting the young kids now. You mentioned that kids are getting phones at 5, 6, 7 years old, right? Walk through any restaurant, walk through any park, anywhere you go publicly, you're seeing kids just literally hypnotized and mesmerized by these things. Now, the average age of first exposure to pornography is 11. So you got a young developing brain there. Male brain full completion is somewhere between 25, 27 years old. So it's like 14, 15 years of just regular consumption, and what fires together wires together. So anybody that says that, man, they haven't had to sit on this side of a Zoom call with a young man that is in his early 20s and is struggling with erectile dysfunction, has no motivation, can't get out of his bed, doesn't clean his dishes, doesn't do anything in his apartment because his brain has been hijacked, doesn't understand how to, can't even look a woman in an eye and hold a conversation, because since the time that he was 10, 11, 12 years old, he's been sitting on the sideline as a spectator, consuming people, having sex. And it literally is warping minds, it's warping hearts, it's warping souls. So yeah, there's a lot.
And you just started touching on what my next question would be. And that would be like, so how does someone know it's a problem? So you started touching on it because you started listing off some of the symptoms that it causes. So like lack of motivation, not being able to feel confident having a conversation with someone of the opposite sex, or really anyone. I think it affects conversations with anyone in real life.
Yeah.
So like, how does someone know it's a problem? What are some of the symptoms that you'd be experiencing without knowing that it's a problem yet?
Yeah, well, here's the thing, man. Is I think most guys know that it is a problem. You know, they know about how it makes them feel. And I'm not here to shame anybody about what you're doing once again, but what you're doing and participating in isn't the right thing. But yeah, lack of motivation, like PIED, like do you have performance issues and you're in your 20s? Like if that's the case, something is probably off there. Like can you not hold a conversation? Can you not look a woman in the eyes? What's the first thought when you see a beautiful woman? Do you instantly begin to undress her in your mind and inject yourself somewhere into a fantasy with her? Yeah, that's what guys do. No, it's not. That's not what guys do. That's what guys that are addicted to pornography do. So yeah, there's a lot there, but I think most men know. Now, if you consume porn and you're like, I don't have a problem with it, maybe there's a challenge here. Then stop. Like if you say, yeah, I can watch porn every day, but I'm not addicted, then I challenge you to stop. And here's two things would happen. I know the one, if you attempt to stop and you can't make it more than 30 days without returning back to it, brother, there's your sign right there, right? It's a continued repeated use despite negative consequences itself. So if you're trying to stop and you can't, addiction there. Second thing, if you can succeed for 90 days without returning back to it, I can almost guarantee that your life will change. Now, what does that mean? I think it's going to be a little bit different for everybody, but I think you'll begin to see people a whole lot differently. I think you'll begin to see your life a whole lot differently, and I think you'll begin to see joy, meaning, and purpose in a lot of things that before were just there because they were just meaningless things in life. So, yeah, I know I didn't answer it directly, but I think that would be a lot of what would really be revealing to guys.
Yeah. And your podcast, you mentioned this, your podcast with Anna Lemke, is that how you say her name?
Mm-hmm.
I
I
think
think it's
that's
Anna. I think it's pronounced Anna, but yeah.
Anna Lemke. Oh, sorry. It's her first name. I pronounced it correctly. It's the last name I thought was tough. But yeah. Your podcast with her was extremely insightful. One that I think, every man should listen to because she really explains. She's what is her title again?
She's the Stanford head of sex and porn addiction. I mean, she's literally the department head at Stanford University, one of the most acclaimed universities in the world.
And she has that's from like a neuroscience perspective, right?
Yeah, so she's got a background in neuroscience and also in clinical psychology. So she sees patients. In her practice, yeah. So she's been not only researching it from a neuroscience level, but she's been in the trenches, actually working with patients and clients for over 20 years.
Yeah. So when you hear someone like that explain with evidence, like how it actually affects your brain physically and like how it affects, it's mostly dopamine that it's playing on, right?
Yeah.
That's when it becomes undeniable. And like Frank said, anyone who thinks that, like you're wondering, is there a healthy way to look at pornography in moderation, like without no downsides? When you start to learn that side of it, I don't know if you have a different answer to this, but I think the answer, especially today with the way it's delivered to us, is no, because it's literally created to specifically affect our brains like that, right?
Yeah, that's been cool for me, man. Is like I have a lot of friends that are high performers. I mean, these are guys that are operating, top 1% in the world. From their fitness, from their businesses, from their relationships. These guys go after it and get it done. When I started talking about this, man, the amount of men that reach out to me, like Frank, thank you, because I never thought about it like that. These guys, they didn't do it morally. They didn't stop it, because there were moral issues. They didn't stop because they actually thought they had an addiction. They're just set their lives up full optimization that if something is not doing good for them, there's no need for me to have it in my life. So I've heard from dozens of men, dozens of my personal friends that, like I said, these guys have been getting after it. Were they quote unquote addicted? Were they consumed it every single day? No, these might have been guys that once a week, once a month, maybe once every 3 months. They're like, if it's not doing any good for me, I don't even want it. It's like putting a drug into my brain. So Yeah, I don't believe that every guy that consumes pornography gets addicted to it, just like every person that drinks alcohol doesn't become an alcoholic, just like every person that participates in recreational drugs doesn't become a drug addict. But if your goal, which the men that you speak to, is full optimization, becoming the best possible man that you can be, I don't believe that there's any place in your life for it. Because like I said, not even from an optimization standpoint, but there's nothing masculine or manly about it. It is the opposite of what being a masculine man is, in my opinion.
And earlier you said, so to someone who isn't like sure whether or not it's a problem for them specifically, just what would you say? Just try to stop for 30 days and see what happens, basically. And if you can't, then you probably are.
Yeah, I think that's a very clear sign. If you're hearing this and you're like, Frank, you don't know what you're talking about. I watch porn and I have no problems with it. I could quit tomorrow. Then go ahead, brother. Do it. And if you're not willing to give that up, I think there's something revealing to you. Why do you need to hold on to this fake world? Why do you need to hold on to this pleasure-seeking, porn that is hijacking your brain? So if you say it's not a problem, but you're not willing to give it up, very revealing. And if you say you're going to give it up and you can't, very revealing. So yeah, I think that's a challenge that I share a lot. I haven't had a whole lot of men take me up on it. Maybe there are some out there, but I think that would be my answer to a lot of those guys.
That seems weird to me though. Like, why not? Like, so if you hear that challenge and you're like, and you're argumentative of even trying it out, that's number one sign that it might be a problem. And then number two, if you try and you can't, then it's an issue.
Yeah, it's like it's a good idea to once a year go 30 days without cookies or something. You know what I mean? Like. You don't need something every day, and if you do, there's a clear sign that it's probably got a bigger hold on you than you're admitting to yourself.
Right. Yeah. Totally.
Yeah.
And then, what would you say to someone like how would they approach it? What would you say to someone who's just come to the realization it's a problem for them and they have no idea how to go about stopping?
Yeah. Well, once you've come to the realization yourself and you've had that conversation or you've admitted it to yourself, that's a problem. I believe the next step is to have a conversation with somebody else. I think you recruit some form of accountability or support into your corner. And it does two things. The first thing I think it does is it removes the shame that you'd be feeling about it. A lot of guys struggle with this. They're unwilling to talk about it because they're living in shame. They're like, what happens if so-and-so finds out about what I'm doing? How are they going to view me? How are they going to judge me? How are they going to look at me? And that's us looking like less at ourselves. So I think once you begin to open up and talk with somebody about it, now granted, don't go just knock on your neighbor's door and have a conversation with him. Like find a person that you can trust in, right? A trusted mentor, a coach, maybe a pastor, somebody that actually wants good for you. And just had that conversation. I think a lot of men, what they realize, and this was my story, like I had no clue who I was going to talk to about this. And I went to all of my friends, like once again, very high profile, very successful men, thinking that I was going to share something with them that they'd heard for the first time. And every single one of them was like, dude, it's okay. Like they literally put their arm around me and said, we got you through this, man. We've struggled with it. I mean, it's every man's problem. Like 70% of the men in the world have had to overcome or struggle with this, or have had to at least battle it themselves. So finding the right guy that you can talk to shows you that you're not the only one, and it gets you the support and accountability that you need. I mean, why do people hire Coach Brandon to help them get in shape? If you want to get in shape, all the information to get in shape is for free online. You could find it in a quick 10-minute search on YouTube, everything that your program has. But there's something about a community. There's something about support. There's something about accountability. And knowing that other people are bought into your success just as much as you are. So once you've admitted it to yourself, I believe the next step is just to find that person that's going to walk this journey with you.
Yeah, and that makes so much sense too. Like because that's tough. That's tough to, and I mean, you can explain a little more about like why that helps, why sharing with someone else helps. But I mean, like I said, I've listened to a lot of your work and I understand why. And at first, when I heard what you were doing, I was like, man, that would be tough, like a tough sell to sell guys into a program. But now I totally understand. It's really the community aspect. And then again, yeah, it relates to what I do as well, the step-by-step guidance.
Yeah, and even, Dr. Anna Lemke talked about this. We're going to keep mentioning that podcast. Hopefully we get a lot of downloads on the Anna Lemke episode, but she talks about the importance of just radical honesty and how when you begin to be truthful with yourself and or others, you begin to rewrite narratives in your mind. I mean, if you've been secretly consuming pornography for a long time, while you may not be telling people lies, like verbally, like this is a lie, you are withholding truths from them. And a withholdal of the truth, in my opinion, is a lie. It's a different form of a lie. So you've been walking around, and this was me for 20 years. I lived a double life. Nobody knew everything about Frank Rich. Even the women that I was dating and I was in relationships with, there were always parts of who I was that was being withheld. So I walked around as a liar everywhere that I went. When you begin to get radically honest, like repentance type of honesty, like this is everything that I've done and I don't care what you think about it because, hey, nobody's perfect, man. And I think that's a lot of things too, is like people think that there's like this perfect human being out there somewhere. Everybody's got their own issues, man, in battles and struggles that they're going through. But there's a power behind, like from literally reprogramming and rewiring your brain. When you begin to actually share truth and radical honesty, you begin to form new patterns of thinking in the way that you tell stories and the way that you view and see yourself from a subconscious level. So yeah, there's a lot that's built into that radical honesty piece, which is why it's become such a big term. Like look at all the big influencers out there. I mean, you and I go to these business conferences. Like we were in Nashville for 3 days and it's like here at a business event, it's like the core theme of that event was, are you who you say you are? Like the truth behind all of that. So there's real power behind this, not just from an overcoming an addiction, but actually succeeding in all areas of your life, I believe.
Totally. Yeah. You can't fix anything if you don't know the facts, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's part of the reason why again, like I said at the beginning, like pornography is it's a different addiction. It's in a category of its own. It's super insidious because it's the one thing when you think about anything else that you can be addicted to, or people are typically addicted to, drugs, alcohol. You can't hide that.
Yeah.
You can't hide that stuff. And you have to like expose yourself. Like if you're an alcoholic, you have to constantly go to the liquor store and buy it, see you carrying it home, that kind of thing. If you're addicted to drugs, you have to go out, you have to obtain the drugs and people find out. Whereas pornography, you can be addicted to it and over consuming it for years.
Nobody knows.
Knowing. And it's
that's one of the big 3 A's, right? So you have 3 A's that make pornography so dangerous and destructive. Number one is you have the accessibility to it, right? You talked about a young boy, 11 years old, in a matter of not even an hour. He would only need 10 minutes to consume more naked women than yours and I's grandfather would have been able to do in their entire life. So it's accessible. It literally is in our pockets 24 hours a day. It's affordable, right? Most porn is at zero cost. Now, when something is free to you, realize you're the product. You're being monetized there, just like on social media, just like on anything that is free. Your eyeballs are being consumed. So the amount of data that these porn companies hold over you, they know more about you than you probably know about yourself. So you have the accessibility, you have the affordability, then you have the anonymity factor. The fact that, like you said, you can sit in your room, you can sit in your house for hours, for years, and not a single person. There's no porn on your breath. There's no porn in your eyes. You don't get glossy eyes or red eyes like you did with a lot of drugs. So yeah, those are the big 3: affordability, accessibility, anonymity.
Anonymity, I'm writing these down. They're good. So super accessible, it's very affordable, and you can hide it.
It's completely anonymous, yeah.
Anonymous. Oh, okay. Okay, so that's a word. Okay, I gotcha. Cool.
Yeah.
Awesome. So I think we kind of covered all the questions I had. And then for my audience, like I know this is something that comes up a lot in the fitness industry, and this is where guys get the idea that it's not that big of a problem. As a lot of guys will ask, like, will it affect my gains? Will it affect me in my fitness?
The use of it?
Yeah.
I mean, to what extent? If it's affecting your motivation, it's affecting your drive, clearly that's having a direct impact. I can't sit here and say that if you're watching and addicted to pornography, you can't be big and jacked. Like my biggest most jacked, most shredded. I was on bodybuilding stages while being addicted to pornography. So I'd be sitting here out of integrity if I said, yeah, you're going to be tiny little, man, if you consume pornography. We know what it does to the brain, though. We know what it does to motivation. So, yeah, I was able to achieve an incredible physique. I placed fourth in the state of Florida, the Florida Classic in 2016 in Classic Physique. So, yeah, you can make gains, but at what cost to your mental health? At what cost to your manhood? What else you're going to have to do to maybe overcome some of the other negative impacts that it's had. So yeah, is it going to make your biceps smaller? Probably not, but I'd be more concerned with like, what type of man are you?
Yeah, I've seen other guys talk about it. Like the one I'm thinking of specifically is Mark Lobliner talked about it. He answered a question, does it lower your testosterone? And it's like, no, just initially. But I'd argue, yeah, for guys who are, you're already in the habit of training, lifting, eating right, building your body, no, it's not going to be a problem. But for people who struggle to, and this is the majority of guys, for guys who struggle to drag their asses to the gym, to eat healthy with motivation,
yeah,
it very likely could be part of the problem.
Yeah. And I think, it's how you do one thing, how you do everything across the board. No, but I think that there's parallels in that, right? So if you're struggling with self-control, if you're struggling with discipline in this area of your life, right? With pornography, I can't stop doing certain things that I want to do. There's going to be a carryover effect in other areas of your life where you struggle with self-control, where you struggle with discipline. So yeah, great question and talking point, but I think it's more about what is it doing to your heart, mind, and soul, and how is that actually impacting your ability to just be a good, solid, strong man out there in the world.
Cool. Awesome. All right. Well, I think that's all the questions I really had for you. Is there anything else you wanted to add?
No, man, I appreciate you, brother. If there's guys out there, check out our YouTube. We have a lot of great videos over there. Reach out to me on Instagram if you guys have questions. If guys are ready to maybe take a step, we have a free book. You can get that at the 7stepguide.com. It'll literally walk you through like our formula for helping men build a life without pornography.
Cool. And then what were the places people can find you?
Yeah, YouTube and Instagram, best two places to connect with me. It's at Coach Frank Rich for both of those. Coach Frank Rich on YouTube or Coach Frank Rich on Instagram. And for that free ebook, the7stepguide.com, and it's all spelled out. The7stepguide.com.
And then yeah, don't forget to check out. I think your podcast is amazing. So
check out the podcast and appreciate that, Brandon. Yeah, and specifically the Dr. Anna Lemke episode, since we referenced that half a dozen times here today.
Yeah, I think that you'll probably have to scroll pretty far for that, but it's definitely worth the search.
Yeah, it was 7 months ago. So 24, 25 episodes deep.
Yeah, and then there was one I listened to, I think it was a year or two ago now, with Dr. Trish Lee. That's another good one. I really like learning. I think it's really helpful to learn how it affects you, like scientifically on like a neurological.
Yeah, no, Trish is amazing. So she's been a professor for like 20 plus years, which is just why she's so able to articulate thoughts in a very easily digestible way. I mean, it's crazy because her and I's YouTube, we started right around the same time. And we were kind of slowly building at the same time. And then she had a couple videos that just like massively blew up and took off. And she hit the 100K like overnight. And I thought about it like, man, that's like, what is she doing that I'm not? And I was like, oh, she's been educating people on this topic for 25 years. She's got 2 decades of a head start on me. So it's okay. It's okay, Frank. Like, you don't need to beat Trish.
Yeah. And I think what you offer is different and good in kind of different ways. So
yeah, no, we definitely, we feed and support each other for sure.
Yeah, it's definitely, it's like a brand new industry. It'll be growing for a while. There's going to be a lot of guys, especially, we talked about young kids today. I'm sure that the average age of starting to look at it, that probably lags. Hey.
Oh, probably, I say probably younger. Yeah, I definitely say it's younger than 11. So, but number one, it's.
You're not going to survey 9-year-olds and be like,
yeah. And even when you hear like stats about like how many men are struggling with it or how many men are truly addicted to it, like you have to take into account that in order to get real data, you have to be willing to or you have to get to people that are willingly to actually share the truth. So you'll see some stats out there. 70% of men, consumed it regularly. Out of that 70%, 40% admit they have a problem they can't fully overcome. I'd say those numbers probably skewed a little bit higher. I'd say half of the men in the world are probably actually struggling with something that they don't fully understand, and it probably has a bigger grip on them than what they're willing to admit.
Yeah. I'd argue more, but
be nice.
Cool. All right. So Coach Frank Rich, right, on YouTube, Facebook, TikTok, Instagram,
all the places,
and then the Superhuman podcast. So that's where to find Frank. So I won't take too much of your time here. Thanks so much for coming on and having this conversation with us today. And to everyone else, we'll catch you on the next one.